Welcome. Good morning. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining the launch of the 2020 Hunger Report, Better Nutrition, Better Tomorrow. We began this report in 2019, when, suffice it to say, the world was in a very different place. The goal of the report at the time was to take stock of the growing global conversation around food systems, and particularly around improving food systems to address the triple burden of malnutrition. So undernutrition and hunger, overweight and obesity, and the enormous toll of micronutrient deficiency in the world, and to look at how food systems were affecting health outcomes, so childhood stunting and wasting, and the growing crisis of non-communicable diseases, including heart disease and diabetes around the world. And then the coronavirus pandemics began to take hold, and we really paused to think about what we should do about this report. We felt it was a really important report to us as an organization, and we didn't want it to sort of get lost in as the world was appropriately focusing attention on the growing coronavirus crisis. But quickly, as we saw the crisis unfold, we saw that a lot of the issues that we had talked about in the report were actually playing out in real time. We saw huge vulnerabilities in the food system, huge inequalities that were really being laid bare by the crisis, particularly amongst low-income workers, the daily wage earners, as well as communities of color in particular. We saw that the increased risk of severe illness due to diet-related conditions, so the heart disease and the diabetes caused by poor malnutrition. And then the lockdowns and the global economic shutdown that occurred, we began to see a rising concern about the secondary impact of the COVID crisis. So we are now facing the risk that decades of progress against hunger and malnutrition around the world could be set back. And so we decided to go ahead with the report and the launch because of this renewed urgency now that we feel to focus on nutrition and to transform food systems. Another lesson that we learned from the coronavirus crisis is that dramatic action is possible. The world got together and shut down the global economy for 2 months to try and contain this virus. That means it is possible to take dramatic action, and why not do that for transforming the food system, for addressing climate change. So we feel we're at a moment in time where we can seize the attention that the world is, the awakening the world has around the vulnerabilities in the food system for greater action. The Hunger Report is really a conversation starter. We put out ideas in the report of what we think need to happen to get the kind of food system that we really need. So building nutrition smart food chains, aligning food, health, and education systems, adopting food and agriculture policies that are nutrition smart and climate smart, and ensuring that we leave no one behind, ensuring that there's equitable access to a healthy diet for everyone. We hope to use this report to start a conversation with our advocacy partners as we think about some key opportunities coming up in the next few years. In the US space, the reauthorization of the Farm Bill, or the reauthorization of the Global Food Security Act. At the global level, the Nutrition for Growth Summit that's coming up, the Food Systems Summit next year, and of course the Climate Conference. So there are some key moments in the next few years where we can all rally together to build the food systems that we need. But today, we're going to start this conversation with two amazing people, Dr. David Nabarro, who is the Special Envoy to the Executive Director of the World Health Organization for COVID-19. David is also the Strategic Director of 4SD and the Curator of the Food Systems Dialogue. And he has previously served as Special Advisor to the UN Secretary General for the Sustainable Development Goals for Food Security and Nutrition, and as well as the first coordinator of the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement. Welcome, David. And we also are very privileged to have Reverend Dr. Heber Brown III. Reverend Dr. Brown is the senior pastor of Pleasant Hope Baptist Church in Baltimore, just up the street from us here in Washington. He is the founder of the Black Church Food Security Network and a leader in the burgeoning food justice movement here in the US. We are really delighted to have you both join us. We would like all of you to join the conversation. There is a chat box. Please add your questions and comments. My colleague Marlisa Gamlin will be gathering the questions and will join us towards the end to share them with the panelists. My colleague Todd Post will be putting links. He's the writer of the Hunger Report, and he'll be putting key links to pieces of the report as we go along so that you can connect the issues to some of the sections in the report. We are also hoping to get some engagement online through social media, so please use the hashtag #EndHunger and tag @Bread-Institute. So with that, I will start with you, Reverend Dr. Brown. It would be great to hear your story. How did you get involved in food security issues? How did you come to start the Black Church Food Security Network?
Well, first, thank you all so very much for the invitation. I've been looking forward to this conversation and grateful to be a part. Thank you so much. So as you said, yes, I pastor the Pleasant Hope Baptist Church here in Baltimore. And early on in my pastorate, I have noticed that when I was doing pastoral visits to members of our congregation that were hospitalized, that I was beginning to see a pattern related to why they were hospitalized. And over again, I was hearing diet-related issues were coming up in their stories and our conversations. And to be frank with you, I just got tired of just praying, giving a scripture, and walking out hoping for the best. I figured that had to be something more that I could do in support of these members and people who I love and share life with in this church. My initial thought was to cross the street. There's a fresh food market not far from us, and I said, well, let me just go over there and see if we can develop some kind of partnership. And when I walked in with this idea of getting nutrient-rich food to our congregation to address some of the health issues and improve health outcomes in our church, I walked through the aisles of the store and I saw the prices of the produce, and I had sticker shock. I was basically, I knew in that minute that we were not going to be able to buy produce from this store. I couldn't afford making that a regular part of my household grocery shopping, and I knew the people that I share life with couldn't either. And so I just left. I left, and some have over the years asked me, well, why didn't you talk to the manager? Maybe they could have created some kind of charitable food effort. And I decided against that, Asma, because there's so much food charity here in Baltimore already, and so much of it does some great work. But my feeling was charity is not ultimately the solution for the challenges related to nutrition, the challenges related to poverty in our community. And so I left out of that fresh food market. I walked back to my church, and a piece of our front yard that I had walked by hundreds of times, on that particular day, with that frustration rising within me and that passion to help, that piece of that front yard of our church, I saw a vision of us growing our own food. So kind of in the spirit of, if we can't afford what they're selling down the street, let's use what we have to grow what we need and support ourselves. So we started growing at Pleasant Hope Baptist Church, my church, and I saw the benefits of it. We saw health outcomes improve. We saw more people connecting with the ministry. We saw people getting closer to the land, learning how to grow food themselves, or getting reconnected to their upbringing. And I started to roll around this idea in my head, because I started to see, in the way of an asset-based community development model, that we had facilities in the church, we had land, we had organized people, and then in our congregation, we have many older African Americans who grew up on farms in the South here in the United States. And that knowledge, combined with the other basic ingredients that I mentioned, just served up a wonderful opportunity that made me think, wow, if this could happen at this one church, and if a Sister Maxine, an 80-something-year-old member of our church, could be the leader of this food effort at our congregation, how many other churches, particularly African American churches, have the same basic ingredients that, with some organization, could too make a difference around health, around nutrition, around poverty and hunger? And so that's how we launched out. I started calling other pastors. Word of mouth started to spread, and we started to organize this network of Black churches that grow food and utilize their facilities in a way to advance food sovereignty and food security, working in collaboration. So not silos in and of themselves, but really taking a systems approach to saying, your church has a lot of land, your church has a commercial kitchen, our church has this. Let's put it together and create the answer that we need around food security, or at least get some momentum in that direction. And what started as one little church garden in Baltimore is now spread out across the country, and we have congregations and partners in Tennessee, Georgia, we have Ohio, North Carolina, South Carolina, just continuing to grow, because our starting point is, in that asset-based model, what do you have in your hand? We don't start with where we are deficient. We don't start with where we are oppressed. We don't start with where we are discriminated against. We start with what do we have and build momentum. And we found that that's far more of a sustainable fuel around food sovereignty and security than starting at a deficiency model.
That's such an empowering, it must have been so empowering for your congregants to really feel like they had control over what they were getting. How has COVID-19 played out in your community?
Yeah, well, like so many other communities, and I love the way you described it in the introduction, we had to take a minute, pause and reflect. I had to literally fight against the impulse, and our organization did as well, fight against the impulse to just spring into action. That impulse to say, we got to do something. Come on, let's go help somebody. We fought that impulse so that we could even have time to sit, reflect, catch our breath, lament, grieve, and then dream about what our work looks like in this space. And so as we did that, what crystallized for us was an opportunity to, one, do more of what we've always done, and two, create space to be strategic in how we evolve. And so in doing more of what we've always done, COVID has pushed us back to the land. So many churches, so many faith-based institutions cannot gather in their big, beautiful sanctuaries. But agriculture, farming, and gardening for many places has remained a part of the essential activities, permitted activities, and of course, being outside on a garden or on a farm, you have more space. And so even in terms of being sensitive to CDC health guidelines, you could do that, be together, but be safely gardening together. And so we have found that gardening for many of our churches has been one of the only things that churches could do. And they were excited just to get back to the land. And so we've supported churches in that. We've sent money across the country to churches to get seeds. We started a seed bank. We've mailed seeds around the country as well. We've trained people in gardening. And so a lot of that has happened. And number two, we have worked to partner with Black farmers who have also had to quickly innovate and pivot like many other businesses. And we work with them to highlight their farms, connect them with consumers. We created a Black farmer directory on our website so that people can buy local. And I think buying local and having micro food systems is a part of the solution for how we make progress around food security and food sovereignty, even in the midst of COVID-19.
Great. So David, turning to you, going from the local to the global, how are you seeing these issues sort of play out at the global level, and the connections between the health crisis, nutrition, and food systems?
First of all, thank you for letting me join and for giving me the chance to hear you, Asma, and also to hear Reverend Heba Brown. Just to react to something that Reverend Brown just said, it was tempting to spring into action, but we felt we had to wait a bit, frame it right, and be strategic. Oh, how I wish there were more leaders who talk in this way. This is a crisis like I've never seen in 45 years as a public health person. A crisis that's striking so deep into the soul of humanity. And I feel that really spending a bit of time reflecting and then framing is really, really helpful. And the second thing was just to hear how, as a result of this, the group connected to farmers, to Black farmers, and helped to create what sometimes one could call a short circuit between the farmers and the people who need food. What a beautiful thing to do. So important. And so much setting the direction for the kind of systems we need in the future that are shorter, more responsive, and really enable more sovereignty and autonomy for producers. So thank you. And now to what I'm seeing around the world. It's really an extension of what Reverend Brown just said. Quite simply, this virus, which is incredibly dangerous and nasty virus, is now spreading across some of the poorest communities in our world and is causing untold suffering. We don't hear about it because, quite honestly, we don't know how many people are suffering, because in the places where this virus is really moving now, there's not widespread testing. And indeed, what we're having to do is to work out where the virus is and the impact it's having through all sorts of anecdotal reports. In short, it's cutting deep into poor communities in Latin America, in South Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East, and also in North America and in Europe. Indigenous people are being really badly affected. And of course, people with black skin color or alternative skin colors who are not white, they're being badly affected as well. I want to be clear that the reason for these differences in the degree to which people are being affected by this virus is simply because of social and economic status. People who can't negotiate to have working and living environments where they reduce their risk of disease are finding themselves sometimes required to work and required to live in particular ways, and they have no alternative. This is a disease that is affecting people who are poor, people who can't exercise their rights, and people who are disadvantaged in a really bad way. And it's international. We're seeing a huge increase in levels of poverty, a huge increase in the numbers of people who are hungry. And we believe we're going to see a big increase in the numbers of children who are malnourished and who are then disadvantaged for the rest of their lives. Employment opportunities for people who are in the informal sector are collapsing. Whole industries like hospitality and tourism are in difficulty. And smallholder farmers all over the world are telling us that they can't sell their produce and they're going into debt. In some cases, this affects their mental health. So overall, COVID is expanding rapidly across the world, affecting poor people the worst, and creating huge challenges for poor governments and poor societies everywhere. I hope that that's some of the points that you were getting at, Asma, and I'd be very happy to expand on that if you wish.
Yeah, so as we think, I mean, thinking about this crisis, and there's a lot of discussion around building back better. How do we make sure that we actually do that, that we don't lose this opportunity now that people are aware of the vulnerabilities? They are seeing so clearly the inequalities and the inequities. What are some of your thoughts, David, about how we build back better in this crisis?
Thanks very much indeed. I'm going to just say that that expression, build back better, was developed after the Haiti earthquake some years ago, and was a very important slogan for the reconstruction after the earthquake. But it's not the slogan I prefer for what's necessary now.
That's fair.
COVID is revealing some real defects in the systems that determine how people live. Again, Heber Brown said it, it's a systems issue. It's showing us systems that are not working. And you know, what are our food systems these days? They've become ways of bringing commodities to people, often halfway across the world. They're very long systems, and they're not really responding to what people need. Most of the food systems we have are not built around what's good for nutrition. They're not built around making sure that poor people can get the food they need to avoid hunger. They're not built around giving decent standards of living for smallholder farmers, particularly women farmers. So for me, it's about leaping forward better, learning from what's been exposed by COVID, and accepting that we've got to do some massive redesign of food systems. Let's put nutrition and health at the center of food systems. Let's put enabling everybody, including poor people, to access the nutrition they need at the heart of food systems. Let's put decent, resilient employment for all who earn their living off the land as a key factor of food systems. Let's put decent living conditions for those who work in meat plants, fish plants, vegetable markets, and all these other places where COVID is being transmitted. Let's make that central. Let's not require people to work in inhuman conditions in production factories simply because they are low-income people who do not find it easy to negotiate for better living conditions. So we must forget nothing. We must learn from what COVID is revealing, and we must leap forward to systems that are better for people, better for the planet, and better for generations to come.
Reverend Dr. Brown, David, I'd love for you to engage each other in conversation, but I'd love to bring you in, Reverend Brown, around this issue of, you mentioned it yourself about systems and, you know, connecting within your network. How do you see your network coming together and really thinking about this moment and thinking about the future? What are some of the key things, your takeaways from this time, and what needs to happen next?
Yeah, well, I think that Dr. Nabarro is exactly right. And I couldn't, in the church, I would say amen to his statement about not building back. It gestures toward a return to normal, and is insensitive to the reality that normal wasn't working for many communities around the world. In my particular context, normal was not working for the African American community. So any thoughts around building back or return to normal is not a welcoming thought. Leaping forward and dreaming and leaning and organizing into what should have been in the first place is, I think, a part of the work that we can do. And with respect to the Black Church Food Security Network, I'm glad and appreciative of the talk around systems, because that's what I saw very early on. Was I shared the genesis story of the network was wrapped up in that was my analysis with respect to charity, or let me say it this way, an exclusive and wholly dependent relationship to charity, which can mask and obscure deeper systemic problems that create those conditions where people need the charity in the first place. And so what we're striving to do with our network, and what I see in so many other groups, whether you're talking about the indigenous community, whether you're talking about Asian communities, Latino communities, Hispanic communities, African communities in particular, what I'm seeing is a recognition for the need to create counter systems. So I think there's a role, Asma, for working within the current dominant system and organizing outside of it as well. For if the current dominant system, if all it needed was the right report, the right statistics, the right moral argument, the golden rule, if that's all that it needed, the government would have read the Bread Institute's reports from umpteen years ago and said, okay, let's just do better, y'all. The reality is, and I've learned this the hard way working public policy here in the state of Maryland, you can have all the right statistics, all the report, all the data, and people testifying to their personal lived experience. And at the end of the day, things can remain the same, and they have in so many instances. You talked about the great awakening of this moment that I see as well. People are seeing how quickly a global pandemic shut down so much of the economy, the food system. And it should show, and so many other systems, it should show how frail these systems were in the first place. That if this pandemic was able to bring to a halt and bring to its knees a corporate food system and so many other systems, then it was already frail to start with. And so this awakening, yes, is happening, but the snooze button was created on the alarm clock because of the propensity of people to go back to sleep. And so I think you're right, Asma. If we don't take this moment, now a lot of people are going to go back to sleep. They're already hanging out at the beach, having fun, chilling and relaxing. But there are a number of people, a remnant of folks who I think stand ready to have a significant transformation of their thinking and their actions. And I believe, frankly, as I close, I believe that it is a part of the duty of those most directly affected to keep the pressure on those who feel it at its hottest of this system of oppression, to keep the pressure on. And that's what I love about the Hunger Report. It doesn't run away from naming racism and naming social and political inequities as a part of the problem.
Thank you. So how do we get systems? And, you know, in the report, we talk about aligning health systems, education systems, and food systems. People think very differently in different systems, but as you've both pointed out, all of this is very interconnected. So how do we have that conversation across actors that should be aligned, but they're not? And David, you've done this for decades, so.
Well, I'm listening to Heber Brown and just thinking, can I hear you lots? You know, I love it. And so it gives me a bit of courage to offer some of my thinking. First of all, let's get the people back into everything we do. Not just some people, but all people, and particularly the people who've got less of everything. Now, why do we talk about food systems, Asma? I don't know why, because they're really the systems through which people get their nourishment. And so let's try to bring the people in, the nourishment in, and just keep focusing on that. Because we know that in many parts of your country, actually, for poor people, getting good, nutritious food is really difficult because it's too expensive. So let's put people's nourishment at the center. Secondly, let's try to recognize that charity doesn't help us. It doesn't enable us to tackle the underlying structures, usually the power structures, that keep the systems functioning as they are. Some people are scared of pointing that out, and they feel it means that they're becoming, in inverted commas, political. Absolutely not. Changing lives so that it benefits people in need involves addressing power structures. And that means being prepared sometimes to question the value of charity, which can actually perpetuate power structures and reduce the likelihood that we will tackle them. And once you take a systems analysis, so the way in which the power structures operate becomes so much clearer. So let's keep focusing, using the systems approach on the power structures and not be scared of it. And thirdly, once you've named something, it really does make a huge difference. When you've named it, you've got to let yourself feel it. And that's going beyond simply just using the words. It's more than simply saying poor people are more affected by COVID or black people are more affected by COVID. Somehow you've got to feel it. I'm feeling it, I suppose, because that's how I've always functioned as a health guy. It's clear to me that Dr. Reverend Heba Brown feels it. That's the way his ministry works. I know, Asma, that you feel it. That's the way in which you've worked all your life in the work you do. Feeling it is key, and continuing to feel it and being hurt by it, and then acting on it. And so naming, feeling, and acting, I think, are three absolute critical things to do. I love the report. I love the way it's written, and I'm going to hold it close to me because it's naming what's happening, and then it's actually showing the suffering that comes as a result of damage to food systems, and it's identifying actions that can be taken. Now, last point, this COVID is not going away. All of you in the United States have seen what's happening. It's actually quite scary, and it's going to stay. And so we're going to have plenty of opportunities to name, to feel and to act around the inequities that are revealed by COVID. And that's going to be something we're just going to have to do for the foreseeable future. We've got to help people who are in need to access the food and nutrition and the healthcare that they require in order to reduce their risk of being adversely affected by this virus. And we've got to also make sure that they can actually get the tests they need and get the medical attention they need, and they're not in any way disbarred from doing that because of their wealth or ethnic status. This is going to be an ongoing battle in all societies, including the United States. And we've got to do it, and we've, I'm afraid, got quite a long and difficult road ahead of us as humanity to get on top of it.
A lot to think about. I'm going to open it up and invite Marlisa to join and share questions that have come in through the chat. Marlisa, are there questions?
One moment. Well, I wonder, Asma, actually, as I'm getting this together, if it might make sense to have any closing statements from the speakers, and then we can go to questions.
Yeah. Any reflections, Reverend Brown?
I appreciate Dr. Nabarro's straight talk about this virus and disease is going to be around for the foreseeable future. It's something that I've been sharing with my congregation as well as I've been reading reports and keeping attention focused on what our leading public health professionals are saying. And our church right now is in the process of reconfiguring because now that the center of gravity has shifted away from Sunday morning, big crowds in one building, sitting shoulder to shoulder, singing, hugging, clapping, crying. If that's not church anymore, then what is church? If that's not synagogue anymore, if that's not mosque anymore, then what is it? Dr. Nabarro's statement and the reality of this virus and disease and the possibility of this second wave that's now hitting various places in the United States is forcing us to have this conversation at the local level. And if I could be frank, again, there's parts of this I'm excited by. No doubt the grief has been just heartbreaking. No doubt the struggles and the challenges are real. And I'm sensitive to the fact that we have 150 some people watching all over the world. And no matter what, no matter where you live, I know this has touched you in some kind of way that has been a great challenge. And I'm excited by the license that we're given in this moment to unleash the full courageous possibility of how we structure our coming together. What that means for a church is not putting on suit and tie and going to a building, but it means focusing the resources on what we feel is most important and what church most means, supporting one another, mutual aid. And so with respect to food and nutrition and health, I'm really excited by what new ideas, matter of fact, the ideas are already being born in this moment. The seeds have already been planted. There's somebody in parts of the world who nobody is paying attention to that is right now stitching together short circuits to bring their community together. And I would just say, I'm so excited. And I don't know them all. I've met everybody. I've read from history. Dr. Monica White and her book on freedom farmers is a source of inspiration to me. Jessica Gordon Nimhard and her book Collective Courage is a source of inspiration. So I know we've done it before. And here we are in our lifetime being tasked to do it again. And I believe if we keep justice, if we keep asset-based community development, if we keep sensitivity to power dynamics and how it is a part of the problem when it comes to nutrition and health, and push in that direction, I think we're going to get on the path of finding out that we already have some of the basic ingredients already in our hand. In fact, we can look at some of our great grandparents and see that, wait a minute, having some string beans in the backyard, maybe that's a good idea. Or tomatoes in a mason jar, maybe that's a great idea. So I think those are some of the things that come to mind for me.
Great, thank you. It's
I'd just love to come in quickly and just build on what Reverend Heber Brown just said. This arrival of the virus is an extraordinary opportunity for the creative capacity of humanity to be made manifest. But it's going to be made manifest in lots of different locations. Of course, in Maryland, USA, but also in different parts of India, different parts of South Africa, East Africa, West Africa, all over Latin America, all over the Middle East. And I'm terribly lucky because I'm hearing about amazing things being done by farmers and consumers, creating the short circuits, creating the new ways of working of food systems. And I suppose I watch it and I think, this is humanity revealing its true potential for collective working to rise up above adversity in an extraordinary way. And I suppose I look at you, Reverend Brown, and I think you've been asked to be one of the leaders of this evolution. And there are many others, but they're not the leaders who are up there who we normally look at, who we read about in newspapers. The leadership of this new movement and human evolution of humanity showing its potential is coming in so many different places at local level, places where you don't expect to see it, in companies, leaders who you don't expect to see standing up and doing it, in obviously all religions, but it's there, and I'm watching it and I'm thinking, this is just brilliant. It's showing what humanity is capable of.
Thanks. So Marlisa, go ahead with the questions.
Okay, awesome. Hello, everyone. So we have a lot of questions. I'm not sure entirely if we're going to be able to get through everything, but I have scanned a few and will try to do my best to ask away. So one of the first questions is, how can we ensure that racial equity is embedded in our policy responses? This is coming from Meredith. She would love to hear you all discuss this and get tangible recommendations.
Do you want to go first, Reverend Brown?
Sure, and I'll try to suppress the preacher in me to wax poetic for 2 hours about the question, because I'm very passionate about it. But I think one of the things that we can do is explore the examples of policy gains in other places and work to translate that to your local context. I'm blessed to be a part of a number of groups that explore food policy in a great variety of ways. And what has allowed me to do is just that. If they're doing that over there, what can that look like in my context? And then I'll quickly just say as well that having organized people most directly impacted is very important at the very beginning of policy recommendations. Too many times we wait to bring the community to the table when the policy has already been written and we already know what we're trying to do. I'm saying that should be a part of the reality that we leave behind. That, to Dr. Nabarro's point and others who've shared, people who are most directly affected should be in the beginning. And those of us with titles and degrees and everything else who regularly invited to these types of things should take the role of note takers and students to the feet and at the feet of those who are most directly affected.
And you use the expertise in your congregation as you were building out your garden, so they know, people know what they need. Yeah, absolutely. David, do you want to speak to that as well?
Just because I know lots of questions, I'll be quick. Number one, we're not keynote speakers, we're keynote listeners. And we listen to those with wisdom who do the speaking, and they're the people who are dealing with real issues. And secondly, I don't think it's going to be possible for the world to get ahead of this virus without countering inequity. If we avoid the inequities, this virus will beat us. It will beat us again and again and again. And that's why racial equity and equity in other domains has to be at the center of policy responses to COVID and to everything else.
Thank you. Lisa?
The next question is from Faustine. How do we build people power and ensure that local production isn't hijacked by the push to fill food stores with highly processed, poor quality food?
David, do you want to go first?
Yes, I mean, I don't have a total answer to it, but in all the work that we've been doing on food systems everywhere, and it's the access of everybody to nutritious food is put at the top of the policy agenda. We will simply go on with a system where good nutrition becomes something that only the wealthy are able to afford. For me, the necessity for poor people everywhere to have a right to nutritious food and be able to realize that right is absolutely critical. I hope that's some help, but I don't have a complete answer.
Reverend Brown.
Yeah, I'll quickly say, I don't know if I have an answer to that either, but I do have some questions and curiosities. I would wonder how much we could study the ways in which local food production has been hijacked in the past. I think history can be a great teacher. I think we need to, as Dr. Nabarro said earlier, name that. Name, feel, act, I think is what I heard. And so can we name the ways that local food production has been hijacked in the past? What can we learn from those situations? And then how do we adjust going forward? I think it's also, and leave it to the religious leader to talk about confession, but I think that it's also important for us to confess the ways that we've been shaped by this system of inequity, so much so that it's within us that we have muscle memory related to inequity. And if we're not actively naming that every day and in accountable relationships that call it out in us, then we will bring that to our new constructions of local food production and whatever else. So I'm not believing that just by sheer will alone in this one moment, I'm able to stay on course by myself. Community is part of the medicine, and community needs to help hold us accountable to the ways in which that we will, through muscle memory, reproduce the very thing that we said we were trying to get away from.
I love
and
that.
so that means we have to struggle constantly to stay in an alternative mindset and not to be trapped by anybody who says that's the way it has been, that's the way it always will be. We can be conditioned into that way of thinking, but we need to all the time work hard to deal with that conditioning and create an alternative narrative. Just Reverend Brown, I could listen to you all day and all night. Thank you.
Lisa.
Thank you, Asma. So we have time for a few more questions. Another that came in from Mark is great initiative to help communities and individual church gardens. Markets and systems have to change to address hunger and nutrition more broadly throughout the US and ensure affordable, nutritious food is available for all. How can we change those systems?
The million-dollar question. Yeah. So markets, how do we change markets?
Yeah, and we can also include this to the US, but then also internationally as well.
Yeah. In the report, we talk about demand and the role of the consumer in also setting the table, if you will, and creating the demand for both nutritious, equitably produced and sustainable food. David, do you want to speak to this?
Oh, thank you very much, Asma. You and I know the good nutrition from the period before pregnancy, through pregnancy, into the first 2 years of a child's life is an absolutely beautiful gift that creates the best opportunities for intellectual development and physical development in adulthood. Poor nutrition early in life actually creates a disadvantage for the adolescent and the adult forever. It's not a well-known reality, but it's so important, well proven by economists and by public health people all over the world. So just let's really spend time and effort reminding everybody of the power of good nutrition early in life. And also the reality that if that good nutrition is not there, then it's quite hard to compensate. And that's why it's such a tragedy that so many kids go through these early months and years in war or in deprivation for this lifelong disadvantage. So let's keep that message strong. Then I would like to see a real sense throughout the world that to deny children the birthright of good nutrition in the first 1,000 days is an injustice. And then we start to move towards all national leaders recognizing that good nutrition in early years is something that they have a moral duty to ensure for their people. We're not there yet. We've got quite some way to go. But certainly all the work that I'm doing in relation to food and nutrition is entirely geared to getting this point across, that it is unjust that so many millions of children in our world are not able to access nutritious food in the early period of their life.
Okay.
Would you like to come in on this question as well, Reverend Brown?
Oh, no, I was actually just going to go ahead and ask another question. I apologize.
Go ahead.
All right. So this topic has actually come up a few times in the chat on Black Lives Matter. So this question is specifically from Pat, although there were a few others who expressed interest. For Reverend Dr. Brown, regarding Black Lives Matter, do we need to take this step? Do we need to take a step further that Black Lives Matter everywhere? So maybe globally speaking, the 135 million people that are severely food insecure in the world are Black. So would you like to comment on that, or either of you?
Sure, very quickly, I'll say absolutely. I think what I've seen when I've been blessed to travel to other communities, whether it's Ghana, whether it's Argentina or other places, I've seen a deep connection between the issues that I saw most active in my local community here in Maryland. I've seen them in other parts of the world. These problems have passports. And I think that if we're talking about a global system of white supremacy, then it stands to reason that a Black Lives Matter movement at its best stays connected to that global community. And in fact, it's already active. I mean, the rest of the world community did not need the United States to start bellowing Black Lives Matter for it to recognize that non-white peoples in other parts of the world who speak different languages are facing the same and very similar patterns of oppression and dehumanization and privileging profit over people and the like. And so I'm inspired by the activism on the global community as well. And I see kinship in so many different ways between the social justice movements, the racial justice movements of the United States, and others. And history books have been written already about the ways in which the global social justice movement has supported and affirmed and lined up with one another across the seas and across boundaries.
Thank you. We are very close to time, and I want to respect that. So maybe just last words from both of you. David, do you want to go ahead? One last thought.
We've been given a chance to address inequities thanks to what this COVID is showing. We must not squander that chance, because it's just giving us a tiny window into the reality of inequity and injustice in our world. Unless we can deal with that, we're not going to create a viable future for generations to come.
Thank you. Reverend Brown.
Continuing on from the Black Lives Matter, that moment, this moment, the latest chapter provides a wonderful opportunity to not just look at COVID, but to look at racial injustice and inequity. And I think heeding the wisdom, experience, and practices of those who have survived and continue to thrive in light of comorbidities of racism, health inequity, poverty, go on down the line. As Dr. Nabarro said, we are keynote listeners now, and I want to encourage everybody around the world who might be watching this, that your teachers might be right under your nose. You don't have to look for a Heber Brown in Baltimore. There are some children down the street from where you live. There are some women who are figuring out solutions in your community. And I think opening our eyes to the teachers and leaders in our midst is just, and then getting active in supporting and putting wind behind the sails that those communities create for themselves, I think is a wonderful opportunity for us. And I'm excited. I'm somber, but excited about the world that we will walk into if we commit to this work.
Well, those were amazing last remarks for a really thought-provoking conversation. I can't thank you both enough for taking the time to join us. I know how busy you both are, and we've got amazing challenges ahead of us. So look forward to continuing the conversation. A quick thank you to Marlisa for getting us all organized today, and in addition to the important work she does on racial equity for us at BREAD, and monitoring the questions so nicely today. And a thanks also to Todd Post for writing a very thoughtful report, and we hope it will inform our work for years to come. So with that, thank you all for joining. Please do continue to engage us and join with us in this conversation. Again, the Hunger Report is hungerreport.org, and follow us at Bread Institute on Twitter. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks so much.